publication exclusively, and have now 4 books on the Amazon top legal thriller bestseller list. So I've done both, backwards and forwards. I teach getting your novel noticed, preparing and perfecting your pitch here at UCLA. I do that, it's a weekend class, and Mark, on my right, suggested we start out by giving you our first idea on how to finish your novel. And my first idea is to start by defining what you're writing, which is whose story is it and what genre are you writing for. Now, on my right is Mark Sarvas. Good. He's a writer, author of the novel Harry Revised, published by Bloomsbury, which was a finalist for the SoCal Independent Booksellers Association Fiction Award. His literary blog, The Elegant Variation, was a Forbes magazine Best of the Web pick and a Los Angeles magazine Top LA blog. His reviews have appeared in the New York Times, the Threepenny Review, and the Barnes & Noble Review, among many others. I'll introduce Ian, and then we'll go back to Mark. Ian Randall Wilson, MFA, MA, fiction writer and poet, whose work has appeared in the North American Review, the Gettysburg Review, Alaska Quarterly Review, and the Boston Literary Review, among many others. Mr. Wilson's story collection, Hunger and Other Stories, and his novella, Great Things Are Coming, were published by Holly Ridge Press. So, to tell you a little bit about their classes, we'll start with Mark, and he'll give you his tip of the day before we begin.
Sure. Well, this fall, I will be teaching Novel 3, which coincidentally is the 3rd novel course, and I believe a track of 5. It'll also be the first time that I won't have the security blanket of having any of my former students with me, because I'm repeating Novel 3 now, and they've all done it. So I get to inflict my evils on a whole group of new faces and students. And I'm going to give you the best thing I offer in my class, so you probably won't even need to sign up after I tell you this. My students know it, because I've been saying it for years. My one tip, my practical tip for finishing, and it's not even original, I stole it from somebody, as all of us do with good ideas when we hear them, is that you write 2 pages a day. 2 pages a day every day, and there's a reason for the 2-page number. The idea is that 1 page isn't quite enough to get a real get a chain of thought going. You can't really build your steam up. 3 pages starts to feel kind of like, oh God, that's a lot. I have to get a lot done today. But we can all more or less really write 2 pages a day. And when I was writing my first novel, I had a group of some friends, 2 or 3 others, who were also writing their first novel. And we entered into a pact where we would send each other an email at the end of the day, an empty email, just the subject line just said done. And that was our accountability check that we had done our 2 pages. If we did not receive that email from one of the 4 of us, the heapings of abuse and emails and phone calls that promptly went out were enough to keep us all honest and on track. And for those of you who do the math, on a 450-page manuscript, 2 pages a day, 250 days, or 200 thereabout, it's a pretty good path to a first draft. So that's my practical tip for getting you focused and getting you to the end.
Ian?
This fall, I'm running the 6th edition of Write a Novel in a Month as part of National Novel Writing Month. And the goal is to write a 50,000-word draft of a novel in the 30 days of November. So since Mark already stole or took what would be my tip for you, I would just say that my tip is to take the class and you'll actually get to finish a novel. But there'll be more later on some other things you can do.
And to put that in perspective, we were just having a brief sidebar with someone who stopped up here. The Great Gatsby is a novel that's approximately 50,000 words. So just to show you what you can do in 50,000 words.
Right. And wasn't it Oscar Wilde who said there aren't 100,000 good words in the English language? So I guess I've been doing it wrong all these years. We would really like to answer your questions. Please keep in mind that we'd like to keep this focused on finishing your novel or starting it actually, because sometimes that's the first step. But we really don't have time to go into a full-blown plot outline with you. But we sure do want to address any concerns you have, and we would love it if we just did a question-answer. If you prefer not to, believe me, we're happy to talk, because all we do all day is write, so we would love to talk. Oh, there we go. First question. Here you go.
what's your advice when you get a third of the way through the novel and find a B story that you didn't know was there?
That's a good question. I usually run with it because if it feels that imperative, then obviously my novel is lacking something. I actually am working on a book right now that I had misformatted it. It was rather boring. It's first person, third person. And the first draft was very boring, and somebody said, you know what, we just need to have this character come in faster, more often. And when I changed that, it made everything go very, very smoothly. But I do understand that feeling. If it's a beat that you think, oh, this is really cool, that's one thing. If it's a beat that you think is truly going to drive you through to your conclusion in a more dramatic manner, and it's going to help a main character evolve, then I think you have to explore it. I would. Commercial fiction might be different than literary fiction, so perhaps
I was going to say from the literary fiction perspective, I would say if you're having that come up, that's actually a pretty good sign because it means that your idea is rich enough that it's capable of taking on a life of its own, supporting multiple layers and levels. And I would say that I would encourage you to explore it because much more so, I think, in literary fiction, you're not going to know what it can do for you until you write it. So you're not going to have that foreknowledge of, yes, this now will take me here. I think it's much more a journey of discovery, and you get to find out. And the worst case in the world is you write 100 pages that you can't use, and that may sound tragic to a lot of you, but I assure you that is the working writer's lot in life. So.
I didn't understand his question.
Oh, if you're writing and you've got a third of the way through your book and suddenly something appears, a plot point, a character motivation, something like that, appears that seems to be a beat that you think a moment with.
I think he said a B story. You said a B story. So a subplot,
Right.
a secondary,
Subplot, yeah.
a secondary story. So.
That you think would add to your book, whether if it was a thriller, it might be plot driven, so that I have a red herring that I need to follow or something like that. That he wanted to know what do you do with it, and at least two of us agree that you need to follow it because. The bottom line is your story has to be rich. There's so much competition out there that you have to be as inventive as you can be. And if this is what's going to do it, explore it. I agree. I've had to throw out 100 pages too, and it just happens. If it doesn't work. But if it does, gold. Yeah.
I mean, except there's no deadline on finishing these things, except in the Write a Novel in a Month class, there is a deadline. But
Do you flunk if you don't finish?
you do fail if you don't hit the deadline.
Ooh.
I'm not taking it.
And that's one of the motivators. That's one of the great motivators for finishing your draft in the 30 days. That and the money. But what is and also me, yelling at you. But what is the or telling you how great you are? But what is the what is the danger of or what's the downside of that happening? I mean, it's almost as if you pose the question like, this happened and oh no, what do I do? But I mean, I think to explore whatever pops up is kind of the excitement of writing the thing in the first place. And obviously, if it does pop up like this is something that's a character or a situation that's trying to make itself known. And I think you have to honor that and see what happens with it. Listen, you can always cut stuff out. It's not like you have to use everything. And,
No.
No. I was just thinking sometimes though, I tend to do things just because it's fun and it's really not a plot point. It's because I want to kill somebody differently or, I don't know, want some more blood. And so I have to be careful, and I think you're writing.
I want to be sitting next to you.
Yeah. If you're writing commercial fiction, I think you have to wonder and ask yourself, am I doing this simply for the sake of shock? Is it really moving that story forward? So is there another question? Sir, and then we'll go to the sides, to the ladies. Yes.
When you start, do you know your end? And as you're developing, taking this idea, would you then, if you know your end, and you get this new plot, would you then subdivide and maybe look at having a series of stories or novels that continue, rather than trying to build the whole thing into one?
To me, putting together stories is very analytical. If you have this beat that is so totally going to change your book, then sit down, take a breather, have a cocktail, You know,
Well, but
think
do you-
about it.
But do you know your end?
I do.
When you start?
When I start, I know my beginning and I know my end. And my end seldom changes because there is a thread of character development that I want to get through. It's not simply plot driven. So I do, but
I'll take a slightly different perspective again, and I think it's born of the slightly different sorts of things that we write. One of the things that drives my students absolutely nuts over the years they've heard me is the answer to every question they ask me essentially is it depends. And that is the answer to, in advance, it's the answer to every question you guys will ask today, because it depends on you as a writer, on what you're writing. I find that when you know the end, there's a risk that the work can feel overdetermined a little bit. That is a criticism that I very freely levy against my first novel, where I did know the end, and I outlined it probably a bit more than was good for me, and it felt a little overdetermined in terms of getting there. So I would say, you may know your end, but I think you should give yourself sufficient liberty to, go to whatever end the writing actually takes you to. So,
I mean, Mark and I write literary fiction, and Rebecca writes commercial fiction, and one isn't necessarily better than the other, but there is a kind of a different approach. I never outline anything. I may have a few ideas for something that's going to happen, but it's not hard and fast. And I'm interested in discovering what's going to happen. That's half the reason for writing this thing in the first place. So whatever happens, happens. Whatever the characters take me. Could we turn off the telephones, maybe? Yeah. Thanks.
an active cell phone somewhere in this quadrant here. It sounds like.
I hear it, I don't see it. I don't see anyone's guilty face. Yeah, not me.
It's not coming.
Not for me.
It's not coming from me.
I don't have banjo
Well, thank
music
you,
on.
whoever's doing it, thank you.
If you're in my class at Loyola starting Thursday and your phone goes off, you're going to fail that day.
I thought I was tough.
I can't wait to tell them. But what was that?
But you don't outline.
Oh,
Literary fiction don't outline.
Okay. So no, you don't necessarily know the end. You may have an idea of where it's headed for, and again, to try to just to bring it back to the novel in a month class, there's a point at which I have to say to the participants in the class, when you get to around the second week of the writing, that you have to try to figure out the ending and start heading things towards an ending. But one thing that's happening in those 30 days is that you're compressing a great deal of discovery. You're compressing a year or more's worth of discovery into a very short period of time. But eventually, you start on a trajectory and things are going to move in a particular direction. And that end will occur to you at some point.
Who did that?
Who's messing with
They're
this?
just fucking
Really,
with
you're
us now.
messing with it.
It sounds like you're taking, Robert Frost once said something to the effect of, I never started a poem whose end I knew, writing is discovery. It sounds like you're similar.
Ann Carson said, I write to find out what I think about things, and I kind of like that.
And I say if you're doing a procedural, you better damn well know where you're going. Because if you're going to court, you have to, so if you're doing mysteries and thrillers and things like that, there's wiggle room. But if you're really capturing a case and an investigation, that's sort of how come I think I need to know my end, probably more than these gentlemen who explore the characterization, maybe more than...
Robert Boswell says, if I knew everything about the characters in the story, why would I bother writing it in the first place? So.
There's a lady right here, and then there was a lady in blue over here. So we'll go here first, and then over there.
When you sit down to write your 2 pages every day, do you look back at the pages you wrote any previous days and edit it out, or just always move forward?
It depends. If that is what you need to sort of get, what I'll say is fiddling with your last 2 pages doesn't count on your 2-day mark. So you can't say, oh, I rewrote yesterday's 2 pages, so therefore I wrote 2 pages. If you're a sort of writer who needs that sort of warm up to kind of, reinsert yourself into the flow, you can do that. I sort of adhere to the old Hemingway dictum where you put down your pen when you know exactly what is going to come next, because it makes it easier to start. You may be reluctant to stop because you feel like you're on a roll, but in fact, it makes it much easier to come back when you know the next sentence, the next paragraph, the next thing you're going to pick up. So it depends on how you like it.
Hemingway, there's a story about Hemingway that he would stop writing in the middle of a sentence so that he would be able to pick up immediately from where it was. In the novel in a month class, the answer would be no. The answer is to just keep moving forward, because when you go back and reread what you've done, the immediate impulse is to edit, and that will be the death of trying to finish the draft. When you're not in the novel in a month class, you, just like Mark said, it may be necessary to go back and to try to get your head back into where you were, into what's going on, to try to reorient yourself. But to try, in some sense, to resist the need to edit, because it may impede your forward progress.
I go back after about 100 pages because I need to remind myself where I've left red herrings and clues and things like that. So for me, that works. Again, I think every writer is different. I write a lot of pages a day. There are 2-page writers. There are half-page writers. I think what you're comfortable with, one thing you should never do is compare yourself to another writer. I sit side by side in a little coffee shop with another author, and some days he'll pack up and go to a movie, and I'll still be there slaving away. We're just different, Some days you're inspired, and some days you're not. Sometimes you work, and it's tiring when you come home. So don't compare yourself to other people. Just do the best work you can, and when you go back, look at it with a clear eye. We'll get the gentleman in the back after the lady in the blue. Yes, right there.
Purple.
Oh, sure. Okay, I'm sorry, purple.
So I think I finished my novel several times, and
Congratulations.
so I come to the point where I'm happy with it, and I don't want to touch it anymore. Leave me alone. It's done. But then I submitted it to agents and publishers, agents, got mixed feedback, and then I still wonder, is it really done? Like, when do you know it's finished? When do you know it's finished for you, and when do you know it's finished for submitting to agents and publishers?
It does depend. Somebody's stealing your line.
It depends. I'm telling you, you've learned. You don't need to take one class now. It depends.
We can go left to right. Go ahead.
Well, that's a complicated question. It really is. And every writer is different. So I can only speak to this one. I can only speak from personal perspective. My first novel, I wrote. This is what I teach in Novel 1 is I call the many drafts of the first draft, which I did 8 detailed, considerably revised drafts before that book even went to an agent. By the time it went to an agent, yes, I was well and mighty sick of it, but I also was convinced that I had done everything that I could absolutely possibly do to make it better without getting advice now from somebody else. I had reached the limits of my gifts. I had put in all the time and the efforts. I was hoping for the best, and gave it to an agent who gave me, some very astute comments, and I incorporated those, and we sold it. I think that I see the phenomenon out there where people are in too much of a hurry to get their books out into people's hands. I'm not saying that that's what you did. I don't know the history of your manuscript, but I do find, you have one opportunity to make a first impression with an agent. An agent will assume that the work that you are giving them is the absolute best product that you're capable of. That is the built-in assumption, but you've made this decision to show it to them. So at that time, I think the first thing is you have to feel creatively completely fulfilled with your book. This now does everything I hoped it would do, I set out to do, as well as I'm able to. And then the second piece is when you get that feedback, because you indicated that you had received some, you need to take it in. If you're hearing the same note consistently, notes in the same end, the sandbox repeatedly, that's a moment for you to sit and take a little inventory and decide, do I agree with this? Does this note resonate with me? Am I capable of putting it into effect, or do I need to seek some more advice? But typically, if you're lucky enough to get feedback and advice from agents, which most people don't, I would encourage you to at least give it some serious thought.
Yeah. I have to be really honest, I am amazed I ever sold the book in the first place, because I was not ready to go to an agent. I don't know what they saw, don't know really what it was, because my editorial letter was 3 pages, single-spaced, you did this wrong. And it was pretty devastating. So what I've learned over all these years, which I wish I had learned much earlier, is to do exactly what Mark was talking about, and that is edit, edit, edit. When I edit my work, and I do about 6 different edits, really full-blown, where I will be incredibly hard on myself, because I have to I personally take off my writing hat and put on my editor's hat. If I have turned 3 pages of my own manuscript and I have fallen asleep, those are lousy 3 pages. If there's anything in my gut that says, that makes no sense, or that's too easy, or, 10 pages ago I said something else, but I really don't want to go back and have to change 10 pages, then you've got to take a moment and you have to go back, and that's what our work is really all about. Yeah, we're all creative, but it's the people who are going to sit down and take that agent's advice or that editor's advice and realize that they are giving you the best they've got. And there's a real good reason why they're giving you advice, because they want to make money too. That's the way they make their living, is by finding the next Danielle Steele, the next John Grisham, the next James Joyce.
Not if they want to make money. No, not
Mark Sarvas, I'm
For
sorry.
the money.
But they make their living that way. If they see something in you and you get a personalized letter, really read that letter and look at it in the context of your work. They're telling you something. They're saying, not that little card that says, "We wish you luck placing this elsewhere." That one you don't have to keep. But the one where they've given you personal advice, look at it in the context of your work and see if you can go back and understand what they're seeing. So you got a good rejection. You did. And hang in there and, look at it through their eyes.
I think you need to separate out 2 questions in there, and one of them is, we talk about the idea of a writing career, but there's also the idea of a writing practice. I said in the last session that there were roughly 700,000 novels published in the United States last year, and 600,000 the year before. So there's a ton of stuff out there, right? But the point is, how much of that really gets read? So if you think that you're going to write this novel and millions of people are going to buy it and read it, it's possible that it could happen, but it isn't that likely when you really look at realistically at what's out there. So when you say, well, I think the novel is done, have you may have taken it, the way Mark says, to the limits of what you think you can do with it. Have you then brought it to a workshop situation, which could be a formal workshop, or it could be a group of other writers or another writer whose editorial opinion that you value? Have you done what you need to do for yourself as a writer? Because the second part of the question is, agents and editors are interested in their perception of what the marketplace is, which may have nothing to do with art, writing as art, or you as a writer. Now, you may be writing commercial fiction, I don't know. You may be writing literary fiction. But the framework and the prism that they're going to view your work has a very directed sense to it, which doesn't necessarily have anything to do with whether it's any good or whether what you've accomplished is the right thing. They're trying to direct it in a certain way for their own purposes. And you have to be aware of that, when you send it out into the commercial world to try to find some kind of reception.
Well, you also have to make sure you send it to the right agent. That's super important. There are literary agents, there are commercial fiction agents, there are vampire agents, there are,
This is not agents who are vampires.
No, I mean,
there are those too.
But that you may want to look at also. Did you send it to the right agent in the same way you want an agent to send it to the right editor? And so now there's a gentleman in the back, and I know he's wearing blue. I can tell. That gentleman, yes.
It's not purple, right?
I don't think so. Did you have a question?
You answered my question.
Oh, that was easy.
It depends.
Okay, go ahead.
I have a basic question. In terms of the average of 1 to 2 pages per day, is that I imagine that must be like a minimum, because I'm an athlete by background, and there's times when I get in the zone, and instead of doing 1 mile or 2 miles, I go 3 miles.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So is that analogous to writing, and if I feel like in the zone, just keep going?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would have students who would do the 2 pages per day, and they'd say, "Wow, I sat down and wrote 7 pages." I mean, if it's there, by all means, then you have the time and the ability to run with it. Sure.
I usually do 20 pages a day, which is unusual for people, but it's because that's why I teach the class I teach, which is preparing your manuscript and it's different. I do believe it's different for commercial fiction and for procedurals than it is for literary fiction. And, you know, I have certain things that have to get in that book. And if I write to them, and so, you know, everybody is different. That's what I said. Don't compare yourself to us or to anybody. What works for you works, and pat yourself on the back. Do you know how amazing it is that all you guys in here have started a book or finished a book? I mean, it's incredible. You guys, it's amazing. So be good to yourselves. There was a lady here in the strike, and then we'll go over here.
About this whole you can always cut it out later thing. I have a dilemma about this, which is that once you write something, it starts to feel real. And I have scenes that I've rewritten so many times, I can no longer figure out, it's just, you know how you say a word over and over again, and then it no longer sounds like a word?
Yep.
You write I need a scene in this place, because eventually this thing needs to happen. I don't know what needs to happen to get to this point. So I, write out a scene. I did the novel in a month thing, and then a lot of scenes that I needed to keep the book going had to be cut out. But so many different parts of the novel are in so many different draft numbers. It's like, it feels like one of the, you ever have to find a salad go off and you're picking the leaves out of it, and you're like, oh, is this worth keeping? Or she's
Did you ever see When Harry Met Sally? I bet you would love that movie.
What program are you using to write? Word?
I started using StoryMill because I wanted to have something that keeps pace. Because when I did the NaNoWriMo site, it keeps track of how many words a day, and I found that inspiring.
Oh my goodness.
This is a rare. I normally don't make like sort of technological kind of recommendations. I'm much more about whether it's a pen and a pad or whatever, just do the writing. But I have been writing my current novel on Scrivener, which is a product designed for the Mac but recently made available for Windows. And I find it astonishingly helpful for the kind of thing that you're talking about, because I used to have pieces residing in multiple different files and I couldn't remember where it is, and Scrivener really allows you to organize it in a single pane and in folders, so you can always get at bits and pieces in one consolidated view. It's not a process answer, that's a technical answer, but you may find that is a helpful tool.
That's why I got StoryMill, because it lets you have you go multiple views. But it is helpful.
But in the end, if I encourage you skip those. If you have a hole, skip it and keep going.
Yeah.
Don't get hung up on the hole. Write the part that you do know, and something will emerge out of that will talk back to you, and then you can fill that part in later. I've gotten to the end of a novel manuscript with a great big critical chapter gap missing because I knew it was incredibly important, and I had no idea what was going to happen in there. So I said, to hell with it, and I skipped the chapter entirely and kept writing, and came back and finally wrote it. It's the last chapter I wrote.
Yeah, my first drafts will have huge lines with nothing on them, other than a note to, do you know what's going to happen? No. But if I usually don't have the answer. I just say it to myself and move on. But if you are feeling that it's pressing down on you, you just need to keep going. I know that's hard to say because I think they're different writing personalities, and it's sort of like I've had to retrain myself twice. Once because I used to write at night till 11 or 12 at night because I worked during the day. When I stopped working and I was able to make a living as a writer, I found I couldn't write in the daytime. It was bizarre. I mean, it was just bizarre. And now I can't write at night. But it's a matter of really trying to retrain yourself. If you're getting that bogged down by the fact that you have all these pieces, why don't you just try letting the story come out? A very basic, so it's 30,000 words. It's 30,000 words that are the honest and true story that you're trying to tell. Then you can go back and say, I need to make this character richer. I need a dramatic confrontation here, but I hate to see you worrying at this point when what you should be doing is allowing the story to come out as if you were sitting there telling it to me. It would be great to see you, if you could sort of train yourself to do that a little bit, just for something different.
You know what? One of the difficulties is that writing is not a science project. So it's not like, and I wish it would make my classes so much easier because I could just say, if you do X, Y, and Z in this order, you'll write the perfect story or the perfect novel. And part of your question also seems to be saying that you've written a scene and revise the scene to the point where you don't know what's working anymore. And this may be the point where you have to just set it aside for a while and try to come back to it later with fresh eyes. Now, you know, Horace, the poet Horace, said that you should put your poetry in a drawer for 5 or 10 years and then come back to it. We don't necessarily have that luxury. Some of us do, but we don't necessarily have that luxury. But the point is well taken. It may mean a few days away from it, a week away from it. It may mean a year away from it, where you can come back in another mindset and with fresh eyes and try to figure it out. Also, you know, everybody, the three of us, I'm sure, have very different revision processes. And you have to develop that sort of critical faculty which is going to allow you to figure out how something is working, if it's not working, in order for you to approach revision.
Yeah, I think the classes that we all teach are here in order to help you cut your learning curve. Because we've been, you know, we've worked with editors, we've worked with agents, we've been there, done that, gotten beaten down, you know, brought up again. And there are so many different ways, but there are some real key things about what is your story about? Who is your story about? I'm helping someone right now who did a great job for 2/3 of his book, and in the last third decided every single secondary character was going to have a major starring role. And it just made my head spin. So, you know, just little things like that, if you find yourself going out on a tangent where this is not following the arc of this character, this main character, then, you know, you can step back and look at it. And I am a big proponent of stepping back and letting it go. A book I just recently published, it took forever, but it just wasn't ready, and the voice wasn't right. And then one day it was there, and it was time to work on it, and so I did. So, you know, never beat yourself up. Just realize that you're having troubles and you're not being productive. So try something else. And I just want to say, I have no literary quotes, but I do know that Stephen King said that he wrote so well because he kept the brain of a 7-year-old on his desk. So that's my quote today. That's all I've got. I thought that was pretty good. No, this lady over here and then over there.
A simple question. I doubt you're going to be able to come up with an answer.
Want to bet?
2 pages a day, single or double.
I'm sorry?
2 pages a day, single or double space.
It depends. It depends. Again, it really does. There was no rule there for most. The manuscript work that we're accustomed to is done double space, and obviously it was a lot easier to write 2 double space pages. And but if one of our number had chosen to write 2 single spaced pages, we would have embraced him or her and supported him with a single space.
Sometimes I do 3-inch margins all around. It's great. Yes, sir.
Do you guys have any advice on filling those gaps, those chapters that seem a little slower than the rest of your book, but you know you have to come back to it eventually?
I do, but why don't we start with the gentleman, Ian?
Slower, or I don't know. Again, it depends.
I'm gonna have shirts, man.
I'm picking up.
We're selling them at the
I'm
concession
picking up.
stand.
You know, my strategy of revision is that you're going to go back and look at the fundamental issues of craft. You know, how is your point of view working? How is your language working? What is the strategic release of information that you're using? How is the pacing working? How are you dealing with elements of time? How are you dealing with setting? What kind of constellation of imagery is working in support of or against your thematics? I mean, so when you say slower, I don't know, you know, it's not getting enough forward progress in the plot. I mean, it's hard to really know what you mean by that. You know, it's not zippy enough. I mean,
it's not an action scene.
Well, it's not an action scene, so that suggests that you're trying to write something where you're interested in the forward movement of plot. You know, but is that really necessarily what's going to serve the story? And it doesn't mean that in literary fiction there's no forward movement of plot, but it's not the key element really. I mean, the characters are advancing the plot. The plot is not advancing the characters. Now, I don't know if that helps you one bit because I don't even know what you're writing, but That's my approach. So.
What I throw on top of that, sort of from the practical advice end of the spectrum, is I would say, and I encourage my students with the understanding that it depends because everyone does work differently. Get to the end. Just get a rough first draft, even if it's got gaps and holes and ugliness, because once you have something in its reasonable totality, then you can really start to apprehend the whole. And then you get the sense of where the lags are, and suddenly things that may have seemed very critical to you, when you have the whole, you realize, in fact, they're entirely extraneous. But I think the more sense of the whole you have, the more critically you can look at the individual parts that don't work, whether they don't work because they lack forward action or they don't convey character or whatever it is that you're writing. I really encourage you. And failing that, if you have a chapter you don't like, chuck out the whole damn chapter and write a new one and see if it's any better.
And I understand slower. Well, how sad is that? But and I have lots of slower in my books sometimes. But sometimes to me it's as simple as going back and, do I have a chapter that's filled with internal dialogue and I have not recognized a dramatic opportunity? Do I have a chapter that should have personal character action in it? Because all this is about relationships, whether it's your hero character arc or his relationship with someone within the book, and for me it might be two lawyers, a lawyer judge, the perp, whatever it may be. But sometimes in an action book, it is not all physical action. It is that moment of realization when the wife of the hero says, you know what, you let this case take over your life or whatever it is, and he walks out and suddenly now he's got this personal problem, action problem going on. But I just think a lot of times what we do is it is so much easier to tell the story than to show it. That a lot of times we're not allowing the characters to act, to see them move, to hear them speak, to smell what they're smelling, to see what they're seeing. So on those chapters, look and see, are you telling us what's going on, or are you revealing it? Are you having the character talk to himself as opposed to talk to someone else and work out the problem or find the clue or whatever it may be? I don't know if that helps either, but again, I love this because we all three come from such different perspectives, which just shows you there's no one way to go. So I don't know if you tell, there was a lady in the back and then the gentleman in the green. Yes. Oh,
2 minutes.
2 minutes.
2 minute warning.
How important is the title, and should you have the title before you write the book, or will the book expose the title?
I think the title is very important to ground you in the marketplace, whether it's digital or traditional. I think it sets up your genre. Jonah?
Don't worry about the title till you're done. I submitted my book to agents under one title, and then my agent, thank God, changed that title, neither of which was the original title that I started with. I think the title is the least of your worries right now. That's what you have agents and editors and marketing people to help you with. And you want to be thinking about your book itself, and we can call it something later.
I mean, the title, a title will probably evolve as you're writing, but and a title may be what sets you off on the project in the first place. But chances are, once you sell it, other forces may have a different opinion.
Sir?
Yeah, this might seem intuitively obvious, but what's the difference between commercial and literary fiction, and how does that affect your?
I wasn't. You go ahead.
So no, we need a whole other panel.
I don't think we have time to deal with that answer.
There's no way to answer that question that wouldn't be invariably condescending to one genre or the other.
No, this is fine. You take my book on vacation. There you go, and you read theirs when you have a glass of wine. There.
That works.
I think we're done. This is Ian, your classes.
Write a novel in a month as part of National Novel Writing Month, Tuesdays.
Okay, Rebecca, get your novel notice, preparing and polishing your pitch on a weekend in November.
And novel 3, writing your novel the professional way.
And thank you for coming. Thank you so much.